I didn't expect a party, didn't expect applause or speeches, but after 38 years in uniform, I did expect a place to sleep. A roof, a room, a daughter who meant what she once promised. Instead, she leaned in just after the ceremony ended and whispered 7 words I'll never forget. Don't expect to stay with us. Not angry, not regretful, just done with me. I didn't argue, didn't raise my voice, didn't even ask why. But what happened after that? She never saw it coming. Before I show you the moment everything changed, tell me where you're watching from and make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. Let's begin. Let me tell you about that day I ironed the creases in my uniform like it was any other inspection day. Old habit, I guess. The kind you don't shake, even after 38 years. My hands still moved with that quiet precision the Army had drilled into me back in '84. Palms steady, lines clean, never in a rush, but never wasting time. The fabric had faded some, sure, but it still held its shape, still meant something. This was my last day in uniform. My retirement ceremony was at 10 o'clock sharp. I was supposed to feel relaxed, grateful, even proud. And I did, somewhere under the nerves and the silence of the empty house. But mostly I felt still, like I was balancing on the edge of something I couldn't quite see yet. The smell of fresh starch filled the hallway. Sunlight spilled through the blinds onto the photo shelf, Margaret's smile catching the morning light, same as it always did. She'd passed 5 years ago, but I still nodded toward her photo every time I left the house. Little things like that keep you anchored. My uniform hung on the back of the bedroom door. On the dresser, I placed my ribbon rack and the plaque I'd be handed later. Just placeholders for now. What mattered was the folder beneath the coat, a slim manila envelope I'd carried with me for months. My retirement packet. It held everything: service letters from Bosnia, deployment orders from Kandahar, the final clearance from the VA, and the paperwork confirming my transitional housing assistance, the benefit they give veterans with service-related mobility injuries when it's time to settle somewhere stable. Not flashy, not a gift, just something earned. I'd planned to stay with my daughter Emily until it kicked in. She had insisted, actually. Said she wanted the kids to see more of me. Said family's supposed to be close when it matters. So I sold the house Margaret and I had shared, downsized, packed light, cleaned every window with my own hands, called the lawyer to arrange the final key handoff for tomorrow. Emily texted just after 8:30. Outside, Jeremy's driving. When I stepped out with the garment bag over my arm, she barely looked up from her phone. Jeremy gave me a nod like we were meeting for the first time. No hugs, no warm congratulations. Just a back seat with a pair of fast food cups and a reminder that their kids had a school play later tonight. Emily glanced at me once. Thanks for letting us host the dinner after. Makes things easier, for photos. I smiled and told her, glad to. I'd gotten used to being an afterthought. As we pulled away, I mentioned I'd be dropping the keys at the lawyer's office tomorrow. Whole house cleared, I said. Fresh paint, clean transfer. She muttered, uh-huh, without looking up. But I didn't take it personally. Today was supposed to feel proud, warm, dignified, and it would have, if I hadn't already noticed the way Emily kept turning her body toward the window like she didn't want to face me. I chalked it up to nerves. I shouldn't have. The Reserve Center hadn't changed much since the early '90s, still smelled faintly of linoleum polish and recycled air, Still had folding chairs lined up in uneven rows like a middle school assembly. A flag hung in every corner. The podium was draped in navy blue. A printed banner read, "Thank you for your service, Mr. Dalton," in bold Arial font that probably came straight off someone's desktop. It was modest, functional, like the Army had always been to me. I sat up straight in the front row while an officer I barely recognized read off a speech someone else had written. The words were fine, polite. Dedication, integrity. 38 years. I heard my name, my rank, my stations. I heard the years I'd given turned into paragraphs someone would forget by lunch. But I didn't mind. I didn't serve for claps. I served because I believed in showing up when the work was hard and nobody else wanted to crawl under a truck in 120-degree heat. They handed me the plaque, walnut backing, my name carved clean. A folded flag, crisp and tightly packed. Someone snapped a photo. A few people clapped, mostly polite, a few genuine. One young lieutenant came over after and said, "You're the guy they said could fix a tank with duct tape and a prayer." I chuckled and nodded. That's what they always said. Because it was true. Behind me, I could see Emily. She was leaned against the wall, scrolling her phone with one thumb, not even pretending to be discreet. Jeremy stood next to her, sipping something out of a foam cup and watching the ceiling tiles like they might move if he stared long enough. I looked back toward the officer still talking. I didn't let it show. After the formalities, people milled about. Coffee, pound cake. A few old soldiers shook my hand, mostly younger guys who'd rotated through my motor pool over the years. Some looked surprised I was still upright. I was glad they remembered me at all. Then I saw him, Colonel Harris, retired now, walking a little crooked from a hip surgery he'd ignored too long. We'd served in Kandahar back in 2007. He was green then, made a call that almost got his driver team trapped in an open road breach. I'd rerouted the entire convoy through a drainage culvert with a wrench and a flashlight, then radioed back the fix, using a cigarette pack as a signal stabilizer. He hadn't forgotten. "Still remember that night," Harris said, pulling me into a hug. "You saved my hide, Frank. Some men retire with paperwork. You retire with stories." Before I could thank him, I heard it behind me. Low, dry, unmistakable. Emily's voice. "Here we go again?" I didn't turn. I didn't flinch. Jeremy chuckled. Harris either didn't hear or pretended not to. He clapped my shoulder. "You deserve a warm evening, old friend. Don't let anyone shrink what you've done." I smiled at him, waved it off. Minutes later, a group photo was called. I stood beside the younger officers, flag in my arms. Emily and Jeremy stepped in last, stood stiffly, arms crossed. The camera clicked once. Then Jeremy leaned to Emily and whispered, "Babysitter's probably losing her mind." They were gone before the camera even came down. And that's when it hit me. The day wasn't over, but something in me already was. The car ride back was quiet in that strange, crowded way, like everyone was talking without saying a single thing. Jeremy hummed along to the radio. Emily tapped at her phone. I sat in the back seat with the plaque balanced on my knees, watching the familiar streets blur past the window. Every so often, Emily would say something like, "The kids need to be picked up at 3, or "We should order food early." But none of it was meant for me. Just passing chatter, noise to fill air. Nobody asked how I felt. Nobody asked if the ceremony meant anything. Nobody even said, "Congratulations." I kept reminding myself They're stressed, busy, tired. Life moves fast. Don't take it personal, Frank. When we pulled into their driveway, Jeremy barely let the car stop before hopping out. "I'll get the bags," he muttered. He grabbed his own backpack, left mine. Emily took my folded flag from the trunk, held it like it might smudge her jacket, and then handed it back with a clipped, "Here." I said, "Thank you," out of habit. She didn't respond. We carried everything up the walkway, them ahead, me behind. The wind had picked up a little, rattling the early spring leaves. My uniform tugged slightly at my shoulders. My plaque felt heavier than it had an hour ago. I reached the porch just as Emily stepped inside to drop something off. She came back out, clutching the doorframe like she needed the support. "Dad?" she said softly. I turned. Her face was blank. Not angry, not sad. Just empty in a way I didn't recognize. She stepped closer, lowering her voice like she didn't want the neighbors to hear. Or maybe she didn't want herself to hear. "Dad, don't expect to stay with us." It took a second for the words to land. Not because I didn't understand them, but because I didn't know anyone could say them so quietly and still cut so deep. What?" I managed. She didn't hesitate. "It's just too much with the kids, and Jeremy thinks it'll stress everyone out. We talked about it. You'll need to figure out your own place." I blinked. Not fast, slow, heavy, like my eyes had to swallow the words before my mind could. Finally, I said, "Emily, I sold my house because you asked me to move closer. You said—" "I know what I said," she cut in. "Things change. I thought you'd have savings or something." There it was. The shrug, the casual cruelty of it. She wasn't trying to hurt me, and somehow that made it land twice as hard. Inside, Jeremy's voice floated out from the hallway. "Hey, where's the takeout menus? I'm starving." Already ignoring me, already moving on. I stood there on the porch with my plaque under one arm and the retirement packet pressing against my ribs. The air felt colder than it had a moment before. The sky looked different, too, like the day had suddenly decided to stop pretending. I didn't argue, didn't ask why, didn't ask what I'd done wrong. All I said gently was, "I'll manage." And her relief, the little breath she let out, told me she had expected a fight, maybe even hoped for one. Instead, she got silence. The one language I've always been fluent in. She went back inside, the door shut behind her. And I stayed there for a few seconds more, standing alone on the porch, trying to figure out when exactly the day stopped being mine. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but God, did it land heavy. I didn't go inside, didn't have it in me to cross that threshold, stand in that house, and pretend like everything hadn't just shifted 3 inches off center. So I kept walking, down the driveway, past the sidewalk, hands tucked behind my back like I was still in formation. My coat was still on. The folder with my retirement packet pressed flat against my ribs, a strange kind of warmth I hadn't expected. The street was calm, sprinklers clicking, a lawnmower somewhere in the distance, kids laughing behind a backyard fence. The kind of neighborhood I always imagined retiring into, close to family, safe, familiar. But now? It felt like I didn't belong in it at all. My legs carried me without direction, looping a block or two. I passed a blooming dogwood, a woman planting flowers, and a "for sale" sign nailed to a porch I'd once fixed a railing on for free. I'd lived in towns like this all my life, posted in dozens more. But never had I felt like more of a stranger. And somewhere between the second cul-de-sac and a cracked sidewalk panel, my mind drifted, not to Margaret, not to the ceremony, but to Bosnia, 1997. A convoy had stalled out just north of a supply checkpoint. Narrow, steep terrain, one lane with a drop on one side and nothing but scrub brush and blind turns for 10 miles. The lead troop transport lost pressure in the brake line. I remember the radio crackling, something about the pedal going soft, the whole truck leaning. 7 men in that vehicle. If it had tipped, it would have taken out 3 more behind it, and there was no airlift that could have reached us in time. I was already halfway under the undercarriage before anyone else could react. Dust in my throat. The slope under me felt like it would crumble with one wrong shift of weight. 2 soldiers were clinging to the rear wheel well, trying to act as human anchors. I told them not to move unless I screamed. The hydraulic line had split. I patched it with field tubing and twisted a clamp down using a stripped socket and a folding blade. I remember my arms shaking not from fear, but from how damn still I had to hold them. 15 minutes. That's how long it took. 15 minutes between the last time they radioed in and the moment I slid out and shouted, "Test it now!" The brakes held. The driver wept. The back truck honked twice. A soldier said, "You saved the whole squad with a wrench and stubbornness." I never told Emily about that, never brought it up at Thanksgiving or typed it into an email, never thought it mattered. But walking through that neighborhood now, hands cold, back aching, I realized something. The stories she rolls her eyes at, the ones she calls overblown, are the very stories that built her childhood. Her ballet classes, paid for with danger pay, her braces, a tax refund from Iraq, her first car, bought 2 months after my last deployment ended, and she never knew, because I never said, because that's not what we did. But maybe silence doesn't protect people the way we think it does. Sometimes it just lets them forget. By the time I circled back to Emily's place, the sun had dropped behind the houses and the porch lights had started flickering on. I stood outside for a moment, watching silhouettes move behind the curtains. A family, mine, laughing about something I hadn't been there to witness. I knocked once and let myself in. There was no smell of dinner, no clatter of plates or something warming in the oven. Just cardboard takeout containers spread across the kitchen island like leftovers from a staff meeting. A few chicken wings, lukewarm pasta, half a bottle of flat soda. Emily waved from the dining table without getting up. "Hey, we already started. Hope you're okay with takeout. Traffic was nuts." Jeremy raised a can of Mountain Dew and said, "Congrats on everything." I gave a polite nod, sat down at the edge of the kitchen counter and picked at a cold breadstick. No one offered to heat anything up. No one made space for my plaque or the flag. The kids ran in and out of the room without so much as a glance at me. Their world spun on a completely separate axis. I didn't blame them. I hadn't been around enough to be familiar, and no one here had ever encouraged them to see me as more than Grandpa Frank from the Army. Mid-bite, Emily called across the room, "Guess you're free to watch golf all day now, huh?" I smiled, not because it was funny, but because I didn't want to embarrass her. "Not much of a golf guy," I said. That got a snort out of Jeremy. "Guess now's the time to start." That's when Mason, my nephew on my late wife's side, walked in. He's the type that means well, always nervous to say the wrong thing. "So, where you staying now, Uncle Frank?" he asked between sips of sweet tea. Before I could answer, Jeremy jumped in. Not with us. No space. You know how it is. The words hung in the air like they had weight. No one spoke for a moment. A cousin stirred her drink. Someone coughed into a napkin. Emily cleared her throat. We talked about boundaries, that's all. I nodded slowly. Of course. Boundaries. Inside, something turned. Not angry, not loud, just sharp, like a splinter pushing through skin you didn't realize was wounded. I stood to clear my plate, not that I'd eaten much, and stepped into the kitchen. As I opened the trash bin, I heard them whispering just behind the doorframe. Jeremy. I'm not paying for his stuff. He should have planned better. Emily, quiet. He'll figure it out. He always does. I placed the breadstick in the bin, folded the paper plate, and set it on top. Then I walked back through the living room, took my coat from the hook, and stepped outside. No one followed me. No one asked where I was going, and that told me everything I needed to know. The house was still, half empty, the kind of quiet that doesn't comfort you, just reminds you how alone you are in it. Most of my things were already boxed. A few old mugs in the cabinet, a blanket draped over the arm of the recliner. Margaret's wind chimes still hung above the kitchen window. I didn't have the heart to take them down. I set my coat on the table, then sat beside it with the retirement packet. It was just paper, manila folder, some printouts, a few signatures, but tonight it felt like the only thing I had left tethering me to something real. I opened it slowly, laying out the documents one by one, like laying tools on a bench before a difficult fix. First was the VA documentation, service-connected mobility impairment, an old lumbar injury from an armored recovery operation in Iraq. Nothing flashy, just a vertebra that never healed right. Years of bending and lifting for a country that would never notice. But it mattered now, because it made me eligible. Then, transitional housing authorization, the benefit extended to veterans entering retirement with service limitations and no primary residence. The policy was clear. If family housing is unavailable, the veteran is placed in Priority 1 status for immediate accommodation in a new VA-constructed duplex unit. But the part that struck hardest was the page underneath it. Emily's statement, her signature, dated 6 months ago, handwritten under the line marked Purpose of Family Relocation Support. My father is retiring after 38 years of active military service. I want him near my family so he doesn't feel alone in this next stage of life. He will be welcome in our home as he transitions into retirement. I remember the day she filled it out. She barely looked at the form, signed it on the kitchen island between making mac and cheese and yelling at her youngest for getting into the markers. Just tell me where to sign, Dad. Now here I was, sitting under a burnt-out kitchen light, reading her promise out loud like a joke, like the setup to something bitter. If she revokes housing, which she just did, plain as day, my case bypasses the standard review backlog. I move to the top of the list. I don't just get assistance. I get placement. A 2-bedroom duplex. Move-in ready, fully subsidized, and not in 2 years, next week. She had no idea what she'd authorized. She assumed I had nothing, assumed I'd cling to them, to their charity, to their approval. But I had something she never thought to ask about. I had this. I stared at the folder a moment longer, then closed it slowly, pressing down the edges with my palm like sealing something shut for good. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't punishment. This was just truth. And tomorrow I would deliver it, not with anger, but with precision. They showed up the next morning with paper cups of coffee and too much cheer in their voices. Emily knocked once before letting herself in like it was still her house. Jeremy followed behind her, wearing athletic gear and sunglasses pushed up on his head like he was on his way to a tennis match, not helping an old man pack up the last of his life. Emily called out, "Dad, we brought coffee. Thought we'd get started early so the realtor doesn't run behind." I was sitting at the kitchen table, same as last night, the folder in front of me. I hadn't moved it. Jeremy surveyed the room like he was doing a home appraisal. "So, what's left? Furniture's gone, just clothes and the flag box, right?" Emily sat across from me and placed the coffee gently in front of me. "We were thinking," she said carefully, "it might help if we look at your finances today. Maybe get ahead of where you'll be staying long term. We can help find something cheap." I didn't answer, not right away. Instead, I slid the folder toward her and tapped the corner once. "What's this?" she asked, already opening it. Jeremy leaned over her shoulder. They scanned the first page, then the second. The third took longer. Her eyes flicked left to right, her mouth starting to part as the words began to register. By the fourth page, the one with her signature, her face drained. She didn't say anything. Jeremy asked, "What is all this?" I kept my voice steady, measured, not cold, just certain. "It's what Emily signed when she insisted I move closer. The VA processed it as part of my housing benefits. They took her word, same as mine." Emily's hands gripped the folder edges now, whitening her knuckles. I didn't really read it." "I know," I said. "You weren't supposed to." Jeremy frowned. "So what does this mean?" I leaned back slightly, hands resting on the table. "It means when you revoked housing yesterday, my status changed. I now qualify for Priority 1 placement. They fast-tracked the opening. It's ready next week. 2-bedroom, single-level, wheelchair accessible. Paid for. Permanently mine." The silence thickened. Jeremy muttered, "So, you don't need our help?" I looked him in the eye. "No, I don't." Then I turned to Emily. "But you could have offered kindness." Her face crumpled just slightly, voice small. "Dad, are you leaving because of what I said?" I looked around the room, at the bare walls, the sunlight pooling on the floorboards, the echo of footsteps that would never return. "No," I said softly. "I'm leaving because you meant it." No raised voice, no fury, no shaking hands, just truth. Delivered with the same care I used fixing vehicles in war zones. Quiet, direct, precise, and undeniable. Emily sat down hard on the arm of the couch, still clutching the folder like it might snap closed and erase what she'd just read. Jeremy stood near the window, arms crossed, shifting from foot to foot like he was looking for something to say that wouldn't make it worse. But nothing came. He kept opening his mouth, then shutting it again. Sometimes silence speaks louder than stupidity ever could. I didn't say anything. I just walked past them, slow and steady, and picked up the last 2 boxes from the hallway closet. One was my winter gear, the other a mix of old service manuals and Margaret's recipe cards, the only things I hadn't already moved into storage. I could feel Emily watching me. The air in the room had shifted, heavy now. Not because I'd raised my voice. I hadn't, but because they'd both realized I wasn't waiting for permission anymore. She stood slowly. Her voice broke on the first word. "Dad." I paused, box still in my hands. "We didn't mean to push you away." I set the box on the table, looked her in the eye. "You didn't push," I said. "You dismissed." She winced. It wasn't cruel. I didn't say it with venom, just truth. Same as everything else. Jeremy muttered something under his breath, a shallow, "We just didn't think," but it didn't go anywhere. Emily moved to grab one of the boxes, like helping now might undo what had already been done. Her hands shook as she lifted it. I let her. It didn't change anything, but sometimes people need to feel useful when the guilt sets in. We packed the trunk together in silence, the kind of silence that doesn't beg to be filled. It just sits there, humming between your ribs. She lingered near the bumper after we shut it, eyes glassy, shoulders stiff. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I nodded once. "I hope someday that's enough." She didn't reply, not with words. I climbed into the driver's seat, adjusted the mirror. My retirement plaque was already buckled into the passenger seat. Funny, the only thing that had been honored all day. Neither of them waved as I pulled out. But I didn't need them to, because something had already shifted, not just in the room or in them, but in me. For the first time in a long while, I was driving toward something that didn't need to be explained. And behind me, the house I sold, the promises they broke, the silence I gave them, which, for once, they finally heard. The duplex sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, lined with trimmed hedges and mailboxes that all looked exactly the same, save for mine, which still had the plastic wrap over it from installation. Unit 6B, fresh concrete, fresh paint, clean edges. It looked untouched. I parked the car, popped the trunk, and stepped out into the kind of silence I hadn't known in years. Not lonely silence, but earned silence. The kind that didn't demand an explanation or offer a guilt trip. Just space, stillness, air. I carried the first box in myself. Inside, everything smelled new. New laminate floors, new fridge hum, no dents in the drywall, no photos on the walls. A clean slate. The VA rep had called it modest, and I suppose it was. 2 bedrooms, wide hallways for mobility, a small porch facing the woods, and a pull-down attic I'd probably never use. But to me, it felt more like a barracks room that finally came with peace. I set my retirement plaque on the kitchen counter, laid the folded flag beside it, opened the narrow cabinet by the sink, and tucked Margaret's recipe cards into the corner. No fanfare, no ribbon cutting, just small, familiar objects making themselves at home again. Through the living room window I saw a man across the way, older, lean, crew-cut graying at the sides. He was watering a planter box filled with herbs. He looked up, gave me a single nod. I returned it. Didn't need names yet. Sometimes a nod was enough between men who'd walked through fire. I unpacked slowly, hung a single coat in the closet, pressed a coffee mug into its place by the machine, slid a pair of well-worn boots under the bed frame. It wasn't much, but it all had history. My history. By dinner time I wasn't hungry, but I cooked anyway. Scrambled eggs, toast, black coffee, nothing fancy. Just enough to remind myself I was still here, still in motion. And when the sun dipped below the trees, I sat on the porch with that coffee in hand, legs stretched out, Margaret's wind chimes already hung near the screen door. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel bitter. I just felt steady. The breeze rolled through soft and honest. No noise, no tension, just me, breathing, settling. For the first time in a long time, it felt like this life, this moment, was mine, and no one could take that back. I woke up early, not because I had to, but because I always did. Old rhythms don't break easy, and truth be told, I didn't want them to. The light came in through the blinds, soft and blue, that kind of early morning stillness before the birds start competing for airspace. The floor was cool under my feet. The air smelled faintly of paint and black coffee from yesterday's pot. I moved through the space like I'd been living there for years, turned on the machine, let it sputter and hiss, took the first sip standing by the window, watching the sunlight rise through the trees behind the duplex. No noise, no demands, no one asking where I was going next. Just a man in a new home, starting his day the same way he always had, upright, silent, steady. The phone buzzed around 7:30. Emily. Just a short message. "Can I come by today?" I stared at the screen for a while. Not long, just enough to feel the weight of it. There was no apology in it, no excuse, just a question. I didn't answer. Not right away, maybe not for a while, maybe not at all. I set the phone down beside the coffee and walked outside, letting the storm door creak gently behind me. The porch was cool under my feet. The breeze had picked up again, faint but constant. The neighbor across the cul-de-sac gave me another nod as he stepped out in a flannel robe, newspaper in hand. I returned it. Some men talk, some men nod, some men just show up. I don't know what Emily expected me to be after retirement. A burden, maybe. A passenger, a loose end. But what she failed to see, what they all did, was that a man doesn't outgrow his discipline, or his spine, or his pride. It just gets quieter, sharper, more precise. I sat down on the porch with the coffee in hand and the sun just cresting the edge of the woods. Didn't need to chase anything, didn't need to explain a thing. I had a roof, a quiet morning, and the kind of peace you don't borrow from someone else. And that was enough. Would you have stayed after hearing those words? And do you think family should ever feel obligated to take in a retiring parent? Or is respect something that still has to be earned, even in blood? Let me know in the comments. I read every one. And if this story moved you, if it made you feel something real, go ahead and tap that like button, subscribe, and make sure you've got the bell icon turned on so you never miss a new video. We upload stories like this every single day. Grounded, real-feeling moments where quiet strength still means something. If there's someone in your life who could use a reminder about dignity, truth, or how veterans should be treated, share this video with them right now. And by now, your recommended stories should be popping up on screen. Go watch one of those next. I'll see you tomorrow, same time, with a brand new one. Until then, stay steady.